is not shaped by decisions itself, but by what happens before every decision you make. And assuming for a moment that you're an average human being, you have around 50,000 thoughts a day. Now, I don't know specifically what you're thinking right now. I do know that around 80% of those thoughts are negative and even 95% repetitive. So you can imagine what destruction that can do when you realize that every action you take and every outcome in your life starts at a thought. A thought that repeated turns into a belief that can run your entire life. But if what they say is true and we do in fact shape our own lives, how exactly are we supposed to send our thoughts into the same direction that we want our lives to go? Well, I have spent the last 5 years coming up with the best answer to that question, and what I found are the most genius hacks for you to control your thoughts and send them into the direction that you want them to go. If you want to get rid of persistent beliefs like that the world is scary, that you're unlovable, or that you are bad at whatever skill or trait that you have in your head right now, this video is for you. Let's dive in. Okay, first I want you to think back to your last 10 hours of existence. Have you really actively registered any of the thoughts you have had? No? Well, then you are like most people who struggle to really grab the fleeting thoughts that entered their head. Your thinking is probably mostly subconscious, which is also the reason why the beliefs you hold are probably also mostly subconscious. And you know, chances are that many of the thoughts that you have during the day already have done their damage before you even realize that they are there. So really the first step to changing your thinking pattern is learning how to properly recognize negative thoughts before they slip away. But how do you register a thought if you are the one thinking it? For this, you need to learn from the people who possess some of the highest forms of mental clarity in the world, which I would argue are yogis. They all acquired this one skill, which we call metacognition. It's the ability to recognize yourself thinking and become an observer instead of just a thinker. It's a literal separation between you and your thoughts. And learning this skill will enable you to analyze your thinking, notice patterns, and start to interrupt them. Let me show you with an example. Let's take a look at a thought pattern that was often playing on repeat in my head the last couple of weeks. Okay, so I have to drive to Rotterdam to deliver some supplies for work, and I have a pretty big car with me right now. And I don't think I'm going to be able to park it smoothly or find a parking spot even, because Rotterdam is a really chaotic, busy city, and well, you know, because I never... Okay, let me interrupt that nervous breakdown for a bit and tell you that this type of thinking was subconsciously ruining my life, because it was strengthening the labels that I had already placed on myself of me being a bad, neurotic, nervous driver. And repeated thoughts like these were, without my knowing, actually turning me into a bad driver, even if in the base scenario, I was just a regular driver. It was strengthening the fear and making it actually come true. Now, when you see how a simple fear like that can literally rewrite a physical skill, you have to wonder how many parts of your self-image are just automated thoughts that you have repeated so often that they became permanent. To find out the truth, let's take a look at how your brain handles the 50,000 thoughts that come in every day. Obviously, it is way too much information for your brain to operate on, so to keep it from burning out, your brain acts as a professional editor. It actually uses a filter called the reticular activating system, which is a network of nerve cells to decide what makes the cut and what gets buried. And therein lies the problem, because this filter doesn't care about what's true, it only cares about what's frequent. Which brings us to a very important reality. The beliefs we hold are simply our most frequent thoughts. So your brain looks at the thoughts that you have most often, and to prevent energy, it turns them into a shortcut. It says, we have thought this 1,000 times, so it must be true. That shortcut then becomes a pillar in your belief system. But if your brain is just a machine that automates frequency, the question then becomes, what then happens to all the evidence that proves the beliefs wrong? The answer is you literally stop seeing it. Once a belief is locked in, your brain stops being a neutral observer and starts selectively filtering your world to prove the belief right. So for example, once a rule like I'm socially awkward is locked in, your brain will dim the signals of people being friendly and nice to you and will magnify every awkward silence, which then in turn makes you behave even more awkward, reinforcing the belief further. So the first step really is to register your negative thoughts and realize their impact. Really, it's like recognizing the moments when your brain is trying to drive you off a cliff. At least you see the disaster coming, but you do still feel like you have zero control over the steering wheel. So how do you take back full control over your car? Let's start with the first step, hitting the brakes. And in this case, hitting the brakes means damage control, because if you intercept your thoughts now, you can keep them from turning into even stronger beliefs later on. But how do you stop a thought process that is already moving at 100 miles an hour? Well, I came up with 2 specific levers for you. The first one being frequency. Now, you don't need me telling you to simply reduce the amount of negative thoughts you have, because that's absurdly logical, but what you don't know already is a genius way to approach that. Because if you remember from the beginning of this video, about 80% of our thoughts are negative. Now, if you don't believe that and think that that number is way too high because your thoughts must be more positive than that, yeah, I was the same. Until I started paying attention to my thoughts and realized that I had an almost constant stream of negative thoughts coming in. And most of it was clearly intended to signal danger and prevent me from making a mistake. Like, don't make this video, YouTube is way too competitive, you'll never make it. And let me share with you the reason behind why this happens. It's because millions of years of evolution have hardwired you into major negativity bias. Back in the day, when a rustle in the grass usually meant a predator, the humans who obsessed over the worst case scenario were the ones who survived. But in the modern world, this trait, of course, is partially outdated. Your brain hasn't realized that starting a YouTube channel or parking a car isn't a fatal threat. It still treats these things like it's a saber-toothed tiger, which is why it forces you to indulge in the fear. Let's zoom in on my belief about being a bad driver. When I think about that drive into the city, my mind wants to enlarge the fear because it detects it as a threat and it wants to keep the danger away. So it also wants to play the what if game for hours. What if I take too long to park? What if people see me struggling? And that is indulgence. And every second that you are spending analyzing your fear, you are actually strengthening it. So the key to using this frequency lever really is to stop letting yourself indulge and resist thinking longer and more about it. It sounds difficult because it's a biological urge, but think about this. We overcome our evolution every single day. Because evolution tells you to eat every single gram of sugar there is in a store, and it tells you to avoid discomfort at all costs. Yeah, people do go to the gym, they fast. We often do choose the long-term goal over the primal urge. So why wouldn't you apply that to your thoughts too? But if you think I'm just gonna leave it abstract for you, I won't. Because you need to be specific with your habits, and just trying to stop the indulgence is not enough. So let me make it more practical for you with these 3 hacks. Externalizing. Your brain actually repeats thoughts because it's afraid that you'll forget about the danger. So how do we convince our brain that we actually have dealt with the problem? Well, by writing them down, because when it's written down, the loop loses its purpose. Do make sure not to indulge in the fear when you are writing about it, but write about it as if you are the one observing, just noticing the fear. The 3 against 1 rule. The moment I catch myself having negative thoughts supporting the bad driver label, for example, I cut the thought immediately and counter it with 3 specific positive thoughts that prove the opposite. Because by answering every negative thought with triple the evidence against it, I force my brain out of the spiral and teach it to think more positively. Now for the 3rd and last hack on the frequency lever, why not schedule worries? The worry window is all about choosing a time and being very specific about it, let's say 5 p.m., to sit down over your fears for 10 minutes or so. And outside that window, the thought is banned. You acknowledge it, but you shut it down. You tell your brain that you already had a moment to worry about it, and now is not the time. If you stop thinking about it in negative ways, your mind will slowly let go of the conviction that it is an immediate, undeniable threat. Alright, now we humans often think that thoughts just happen to us, and we forget that we are actually the ones who can send them into the right direction. So the second lever is tone. Because like I said, you have an incredible amount of power over what your thoughts look like. But let's take a look at the number one mistake that most people make, which is that they go overly positive. If your brain is convinced you're a bad driver and you tell yourself, I'm a racing pro, your filter will obviously reject it as a lie. Instead, what you need to do is strip the thought of emotional charge. You switch from, I am a bad nervous driver, to a more neutral statement, like, I am a driver. I am an okay driver. The thing is that you aren't trying to be a good driver yet. You are just removing the judgment, because if you stick to the facts, you prevent your brain from constantly firing a danger signal. Let's take a look at the next example to apply both levers to our thoughts, so we can make sure that you are well equipped to do this yourself too. What I want to talk about is the gifted kid trap, which is the belief that talent should be effortless and that struggle is a sign of failure. And this belief is often accompanied by thoughts like, I've hit my limits and this is as far as my natural intelligence can take me. Now, to hit the brakes on a thought like this, let's start by changing the tone. When you feel like your intelligence hits a wall, or when you feel like you don't have enough brain capacity to comprehend something, your internal monologue might be something like, I don't get this, I am clearly reaching my limit. But what you want to do is switch to a more neutral statement like, I am currently experiencing learning friction because my brain is working hard. And in this case, we can also add facts to that statement. Like, frustration and making errors are powerful signals that tell your nervous system that a change is needed, often leading to neuroplasticity, which is the increase of intelligence through new neural connections. Alright, let's now focus on the frequency of a thought like this. When things get difficult, your brain is generating exit signals at a massive rate. Like, I cannot do this, maybe this isn't my thing, I'm just not a numbers person. Your brain is literally trying to keep you from danger by convincing you to quit. And this is the indulgence that we talked about. By letting a thought like this linger on the passenger seat, you are training your brain to focus on the evidence of your failures. But instead of letting that thought marinate, you need to use a pattern interrupt. Give yourself a hard no in your mind. Then take time to write down the actual reality of what's happening. Like, I noticed that I felt frustration because my brain is not used to things being this difficult. And that made me feel exposed. In the moment, it felt like a hint of mental limit, but what was really happening is that I was experiencing learning friction. Alright, you have successfully hit the brakes on your thoughts now. You've stopped reinforcing the old beliefs, but they're not gone yet. So that's why in the next part, you are gonna expose your deepest, most influential beliefs. Because if you haven't realized it yet, many of the beliefs you have were formed all the way back in your childhood. And since then, you have been reinforcing them with more and more evidence every day, stacking brick after brick. So you can imagine how heavy those structures are by now. I call them your legacy pillars, the foundational beliefs that form the basis for your entire perception. And these beliefs have been supporting you for decades, driving every major decision that you make. But the truth is, you never chose them. You didn't wake up as a child one day and now think that intelligence equals worthiness. So let me tell you the hard but eye-opening truth. These pillars were often placed on you by your environment, your parents, or your early school years. You were building a foundation on rules that you didn't necessarily choose yourself. So to find out what your foundation is made of, I want you to say these 5 healthy statements with me. And I want you to pay close attention to the ones where you feel a spike of internal resistance. If I come in last in a competition, I don't lose my worth. I am just as valuable with as without makeup or expensive clothes. I am safe even when I don't please the people around me. I am allowed to be the main character in my own life. Being average is okay. Now, was there one that was difficult to say for you? Or one that you just simply couldn't agree with? That is your compass. If you can't say being average is okay, for example, your legacy pillar might be, I am only valuable if I am exceptional. But how do you know where that comes from? Well, the best way to get the most valuable knowledge is to dive back to your childhood. And that means analyzing your home environment from when you were young. So what are some of the questions that you can ask yourself? First one being, what did I have to do to be celebrated? Let me give you an example. In my environment, the cursing was performance. So I was put in advanced classes, praised for my performance and all that. And I remember the day of our national lower school exams, the teacher announced that whoever got the perfect score, and there were like 2 kids in the class that got perfect score, would get this delicious chocolate pastry. Now, everyone said it would be me, but there was so much, both external as internal pressure, that I was so absolutely terrified of the idea that it might not be me. So following up on that, what was I never allowed to be? I was never allowed to be average in this environment. The thought of not getting that pastry, of being average, being just like the rest, it felt like a death sentence to my identity. So I was actually so terrified that I locked myself in the bathroom to open the results myself. And I found out that I did get the perfect result, but this was further reinforcing the beliefs that I already had, and therefore, again, confirming that my value is tied to my performance. Now, the third question is, what behavior kept me safe when I was 6 years old? At that age, for me, overachieving was my safety. As long as I was the best, I was seen, I was celebrated, and I was safe from the tragedy of being ordinary and ignored. Okay, now here's the thing. Most people that claim to have a lot of self-knowledge will actually stop here, thinking that knowing their past is the same as changing their future. But if you really want to change the course of your life, you need to go further. Because hitting the brakes on the car that was driving you off the cliff only keeps it from falling off. But in order to regain full control over the car, you need to steer the wheel into a complete different direction. Alright, now like we have seen, we have been building on top of these legacy pillars for so long that by the time that we are far into adulthood, it seems impossible for us to push them down. But what if we didn't have to push them down at all? What if we could build a new belief that contrasts so heavily with the old one that it's impossible for them to exist at the same time? Alright, but then how in the world are you gonna build a new pillar that's just as strong or even stronger than the pillar you have been building your entire life? Well, to catch up, you need a system of smart hacks to get this new belief up from the ground faster than your old one is able to tear it down. So let's start with the first one. If your brain thinks that you're a failure and you simply say to yourself, I'm a genius, your brain will simply reject it as a lie. So what you need is a bridging statement. And what you need to do is that instead of a huge leap, you use a sentence that is 100% logically true and that your brain cannot deny easily. Like, I am open to the possibility that my worth is constant, regardless of this specific result. And that is a thought that you can actually repeat every day without your brain wanting to throw it out. But in order to really build the bridge to your new belief, you need to define it extremely well and specific. So for example, instead of writing intelligence doesn't equal worthiness, you write intelligence is a tool I use and not a measure of my existence. By narrowing that definition, you create a more balanced and realistic view of yourself. Also, I would encourage you to be way more specific. So hell, if you need it, write a 2-page essay on what this new belief should look like and be, because that will make it much easier for you to generate thoughts that align with this new belief. But that does raise a new question, because now that you have carefully constructed this new belief, how in the world are you gonna make your brain actually believe it? Well, you start by building an evidence vault. In order to catch up on years of evidence of the old belief, you need to collect as much evidence as you can that the new belief is more plausible than the old one. But where to find this evidence? Well, every time you do something that supports your new belief, no matter how small, you log it. If you park a car well, understand the difficult concepts, or even just handle a mistake without spiraling for an hour, you write it down. I myself would actually go very far in the ways in which I force my brain to come up with evidence of positive things throughout my day, and that actually dramatically changed my thinking habits and made me think way more positive. Why? Well, because it forced my brain to finally look at the new evidence, ultimately giving the new pillar a chance of being proven true. but you don't just want to give it a chance because your happiness depends on all of this. So you want to make the victory of the new belief inevitable. So for the next hack, imagine a relative telling you that she finds herself incompetent. You wouldn't necessarily just let her say that and not ask for her reasons behind it, right? What if you could build the habit to debate your own mind like you do others? Why would you keep letting it tell you everything at once? You wouldn't let other people do that either. What I mean by that is that you have to stop being a passive listener and become an active debater. That means that you put your thoughts on the witness stand. So when your brain says you're a bad driver, it didn't go well today, you ask it, yeah, why? Then it might say, because you made a mistake parking. It took you too long. People had to wait for you to be done. What you want to do is keep asking it why questions and debate it like it's your opponent. Why is waiting for 2 minutes a problem? Well, because people don't like that. And you say, traffic is like that. Everyone needs to wait in traffic sometime. That's normal. Why is me taking a little bit more time to park a problem when thousands of people get stuck in a traffic jam every day, honk at each other, or get fines, or even crash? I don't know. That's what you want. You want to keep asking it why questions until your brain hits a dead end. Because the moment that your internal critic has to say, I don't know, you have now exposed that this pillar isn't a hard fact. Alright, now after doing all of this work, you have already come very far. But the thing that usually has the biggest payoff also comes with the highest effort. So that brings me to say that your brain believes actions more than words. So to get the most valuable evidence, you need to go beyond thoughts. But what might that look like? Well, if your new pillar that you are building is that your worthiness is not measured by your intelligence, what if you were to actually go into a meeting and say, I actually don't know the answer to that. Can someone explain it? When you experience the fact that people still respect you or even value your honesty, you have now laid the heaviest stone in your new foundation. And you know, when I can step in a car and drive to Rotterdam, facing the things that used to paralyze me, I truly believe that you can do this too. Now that we have gone over all these steps, I want you to take a moment to imagine how different your life could look like and the opportunities that you would have if you weren't stopped by so many discouraging thoughts. Think about how so many people are just sitting back and letting their thoughts get the best of them, being controlled by the beliefs that the environment put on them when they were young. And think about how far ahead everyone you would get if you stopped being led by your thoughts but leading them instead. Truth is that even a little bit more habit and discipline with your thoughts can change your life in a complete different direction. And doing this really means that you are treating the problems at its root cause, because you are now stopping your thoughts before they can turn into harmful actions or beliefs that are shaping your entire future. Alright, that's it. Thank you for giving me your valuable time. I'm Sydney, and I hope to see you in the next.